that introduction. I think the major dispute that confronts the Republicans here is understanding what the mission of the United States is as a republic under the Constitution. And it was explained in the very initial words of the preamble. We the people are about here to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. That means the United States. And the Constitution establishes the duty to create a common defense. And defense is defense, not offensive warfare, going around the world in search of monsters to destroy, which John Quincy Adams deplored in his 1821 July 4th address. That is, utilize our defense resources to protect Americans here at home, whether it's border security, anti-defense missile systems, intelligence gathering, or whatever, but not creating war, because the architecture of war destroys Republican values and liberties. Remember the Constitution itself, the first three words, we the people of the United States. That means we are sovereign, we have a right to know what our government is doing. Transparency is the rule, not the exception. Because we can't give consent to the government unless we know what it's doing. And also, the whole purpose of the Constitution, as the Declaration of Independence indicated, was to secure the blessings of liberty, unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not to create empires. That's the sole goal of government, according to our founding documents. That's not what we're about anymore. And if I can give you just an illustration of how we've inflated danger to justify going abroad and searching to create liberty or democracy abroad instead of using that resources at home to defend ourselves. Let's consider the latest disclosures by our counterintelligence, counterterrorism people as to the level of the international terrorist threat created by al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan. The estimates out of the CIA of the number of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan is 50 to 100. The number in Pakistan, fewer than 300. Fewer than 500 in total, and we have over 100,000 troops there. Now, if you take that enemy-to-troop ratio in Afghanistan and Pakistan and apply it to the forces the United States was opposing in World War II in Germany and Japan, we would have had an armed forces of 3.4 billion. That is, we would have had to multiply the population 25 times and conscript everyone to fight. But that's an example of how we have inflated danger to justify going abroad. And the process has been to destroy our liberties and the rule of law at home. Now, of course, if there was no harm whatsoever, it still would seem to me a tragedy that we have itself inflicted another 9/11 plus in Iraq and Afghanistan by fighting and having deaths there that shouldn't have been incurred because these soldiers could have protected us at home, even though it wouldn't have prevented any conceivable future terrorist attack, just like murder prosecutions and convictions don't prevent any conceivable future murder. But that's what we've done by projecting abroad, inflicting needless casualties. But even more important, it has destroyed our Republican values at home. The most important concept the Founding Fathers cherished was due process of law. The meaning that we have our liberty secure unless the government gives us an opportunity to justify what we've done without any encroachments, without showing that we have been in any dereliction that would justify encroachment on our freedom. And what we have with the legal architecture of war is the destruction of due process. We have the ideas of enemy combatants. We detain people, U.S. citizens or non-citizens, without accusation, without trial, indefinitely. Indefinitely. But this goes back to even the pre-Magna Carta days of King John, who threw people into dungeons without recourse and led ultimately to Magna Carta. Totally alien to the idea of the United States. These are U.S. citizens. And moreover, we get it wrong. It's not just that it's a procedural, academic issue. At Guantanamo Bay, after the United States Supreme Court ruled that those detainees had a right to challenge their detentions before a neutral magistrate in federal court, the United States has lost 6 out of 7 cases. We've gotten it wrong most of the time. I was involved in defending 17 Uyghurs who were detained there. They rotted for over 7 years. And the United States finally said, you know, we have no evidence at all that these Uyghurs are enemy combatants. In fact, they are ones who despise the communist Chinese regime in Beijing, and if anything, would be our natural allies, but we picked them up in Afghanistan, probably because we were paying people bounties to give us evidence of an al-Qaeda connection, and detained them at Guantanamo Bay. They rotted there 7 years. Moreover, it was an insult to them to say we would not permit them to come to the United States, enter even though they are absolutely innocent, because they were illegal aliens. And they didn't have green cards. We couldn't send them back to China because they'd be tortured or killed. And we ended up then playing the role, I think disgraceful, shopping around the world to Paleo or Bermuda. Would you please take them? Because we would offend China if we came to the United States. They might not buy our bonds that are needed because we run $1.5 trillion deficits. That's just one example of how, in my judgment, our system of justice has been defaced. Take another example. The President of the United States claims authority to stick any American citizen at home or abroad on an assassination hit list. You know what? You are creating an imminent danger to national security. Don't ask me why. I don't have to go to any authority to check to see whether I have cause to believe that you are now on the hit list. And I can wipe you out and run you out, no due process. An extraordinary power. Unprecedented power. Something we'd ordinarily associate with a czar. Or Vladimir Putin, who goes after Mr. Litvinenko in London with polonium-211. The United States, we crown an authority with that power? King George III would be blushing with envy. You know, at 1776, why don't I have that power? This is the President of the United States. Moreover, think also of the whole idea of war. The architecture of war against international terrorism has two distinct features. One, it never ends. No one has ever conceived of any threshold of terrorism that says, the war's ended, there's only been X-terrorist incidents. First time in the history of the country, the war, by definition, has no endpoint. And James Madison, who admonished, you cannot have freedom in a state of permanent war. The second feature of this architecture is that all of the planet becomes a battlefield. Terrorism can occur anywhere, and therefore if you're fighting terrorism, you can use military force, you can use military law anywhere you wish. And that's why we could send, and we claim the authority, to send in predator drones, any country in the world, invade any country. We think you've got Al-Qaeda there. We may be wrong, so what? You're on the battlefield. And sometimes you get it wrong on the battlefield. These are things that are totally offensive to the idea of a republican system of government and rule of law that the Founding Fathers cherished. And then you get to the issue of accountability of government officials. Government crime is to be deplored. We need a government that must set the standard of faithful adherence and enforcement of the law, not violations. And we have the government claiming, in the context of this war, state secrets privilege. We've had individuals who claim they've been illegally kidnapped, detained, brutalized in Afghanistan and elsewhere. They want to sue the government, those who are involved in violating their constitutional rights. And the administration, the executive branch says, you know what? State secrets. You would identify that secret agent who tortured you if you won the case. Therefore, you have to dismiss it. You have to dismiss it based on state secrets. Again, the rule of law turns into an engine of injustice. Take the case of the Canadian, the Syrian Canadian, Omar, who was kidnapped, sent to Syria ultimately by the CIA from Kennedy Airport. He was tortured, sent back to Canada. He was ultimately acquitted there, exonerated. They paid him $10 million for the torture and the illegal detention. He's still on the United States list of terrorists. And the United States has claimed state secrets when he sued in the U.S. courts. His case was dismissed. He couldn't have his constitutional rights honored because state secrets would have, if state secrets not invoked, you would then identify his culprit who was a covert agent. That's how the rule of law is tarnished. We even have a system now where the president says, I don't even have to send up my officials to respond to a congressional subpoena. Don't even respond. There's no government oversight anymore. There's no government oversight. You may recall in the cases of Harriet Miers and Carl Roach said, we don't even have to show up to claim even executive privilege. The Congress has no authority over us because we served in the White House. And then you had sort of a variation under Obama. Remember Denise Rogers? She was the social secretary who was responsible for preventing the crashing of the party at the White House. Oh, executive privilege, state secrets. You can't go up and testify about that. And of course, oversight, checks and balances is critical to retaining government abuses, to containing and punishing government abuses. The informing function of Congress is perhaps its most important. Government in the sunshine. Sunshine is the greatest disinfectant. And that is all evaporated with this empire mentality because everything is subordinated to national security. Everything's subordinated to national security. And moreover, we have this, I think, totally wrong-headed idea that we cannot be safe unless we make all the world in our image, unless we have no failed states. So we have to be in Afghanistan because otherwise it could be a breeding ground for Al-Qaeda. Then we have to go into Yemen because it could be a breeding ground for Al-Qaeda. Then Somalia. Then Uganda. Where does it stop? Where does it stop? And for what purpose? You telling me that the United States does not have the ability to protect itself at home with defensive measures, with the ability to retaliate and crush anyone who attacked us? We certainly do have that capability. Moreover, under those circumstances, we would easily be able to, in my judgment, reinstitute the draft. We want people in the United States at some time to protect their own family, their citizens, from attack by a foreign enemy. We wouldn't have what's the equivalent of volunteer armies, the Russians, I mean the German Hessians, that make it much easier to go abroad because it's not the people with power, with prominence, who are there serving the country. In any event, I think when I have further remarks, I'll be able to demonstrate that these international terrorists are criminals. They're thugs, they're not warriors. And the criminal justice system has been as efficient and as good at deterring international terrorists as they do murders, which occur with much greater frequency. And that's the model we should stick with. It's the model that the Republic tried to bequeath to us, and I think will return us to the kind of country that the Founding Fathers envisioned. Thanks.